All right, let's go across to former National Security Advisor to the U.S. government. Ambassador John Bolton is now joining us. Ambassador, thank you very much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. There seems to be a bit of a thaw, or at least that's the phrase here in the Indian media that's being used in the India-US relationship after the last month or so of these tariff threats and so on, and you know, all the comments that were coming out of White House officials. Just over the last few days, President Trump has called the India relationship a special one. He's called Prime Minister Modi a friend of his. The new ambassador designate, Sergio Gore, in his Senate confirmation hearing, again had nice things to say about India and the relationship. Do you see this as a softening of the position by the Trump White House and by President Trump in particular? And if it is, what do you attribute it to? Why has this softening happened?
Well, it's better than the opposite. I guess I'd say that. And, you know, it's good for a couple days in Trump world. I do think that he and Prime Minister Modi have a good personal relationship. They certainly did until the recent issues arose. So for Trump, that's the basis of everything else. That he sees state-to-state relations as being the equivalent of personal relations. And I think he does have a lot of respect for Prime Minister Modi. Now, whether that is enough to carry us beyond not only the tariffs that Trump has imposed, but his calls over the weekend after the incursion into Polish airspace by Russian drones, where Trump said he wasn't going to impose any further sanctions on Russia until Europe cut off all its own purchases of Russian oil and gas and imposed 50 to 100% tariffs on India and China for their purchases of Russian gas. So many people are questioning exactly what that last call to Europe to do really means. But I think it shows the reality of how Trump works, and that is in a very confused way.
So there are trade conversations that are happening this week between India and the U.S. The view here in India seems to be, if you were to divide up the tariffs into two parts, one was the reciprocal tariffs that were announced in early August, and then the second set of tariffs, which were the secondary tariffs on purchasing Russian oil that came into effect at the end of August. And India feels that it's the secondary tariffs which are the problem because no other country has been slapped with this, and 50% tariffs make Indian goods unviable in the US market. So if Trump were to walk back on the second set of tariffs, India can live with the first set of tariffs. What are the chances that Trump might walk back on the second one, and what will it take for him to walk back on it?
Well, I don't think it's impossible because he doesn't move in straight lines and often doubles back. You may have heard the Wall Street slogan with some of his threats on tariffs: Trump always chickens out. In this case, he did put the extra 25% tariffs in effect, but he could pull them back. I think it's possible. I don't know when, but I do think it's possible. My understanding was as well there was concern in India that on the, I'll call them the underlying economic tariffs, that Indian negotiators thought they and their American counterparts were making progress when all of a sudden Trump called off a round of negotiations, I think it was back in August, and put 25% tariffs on. That happened to other countries too. That's not consolation, I understand, but that's the way Trump tends to do things. So if those negotiations resumed, that I think would also be a positive sign, because it may be the two sides were actually not that far apart in reaching an agreement. Maybe neither side liked it, but it could be the tariffs would end up being lower than that first tranche of 25%.
I also want to ask you if you think this recent softening has anything to do with the pictures of bonhomie that we saw between Modi and Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin in Tianjin at the SCO Summit. And do you really think that these three countries can come together and sort of realign the global order or the global playbook, as it were? Is that why Trump has seemingly softened in the last few days?
Well, I think the pictures may have had an effect. I think that's what Prime Minister Modi intended. I think that's the way it was read in the United States. I think, though, over the long term, it's extraordinarily unlikely that India and China will join up together against anybody. And the real question is, as Russia and China form an ever closer axis, obviously with China as the predominant partner, not like the Sino-Soviet alliance of the Cold War, where it was the Soviet Union that was the senior partner. I think that inevitably poses a decision for India whether to reduce the level of dependence and ties it's had with Russia, and at least in my view, move more toward working with things like the Asian Security Quad, Japan, Australia, India, and the United States.
I just want to talk a little bit about that because India is supposed to be hosting the Quad later this year. We still don't have confirmation whether Trump will fly down to India for that. And the general sense is in the Trump administration in the second term, there has been a de-emphasis of, putting India as some kind of a strategic counterweight to China. Trump's not that interested in the Quad anymore. He just wants to cut a deal with Xi Jinping. So where does that leave countries like Japan, Australia, and India?
Well, I think many countries are confused and a little worried about Trump's inability to focus on big strategic issues. He loves to focus on discrete deals. He loves to talk about tariffs because they involve dollars and cents, which he feels comfortable with. But it is the big strategic picture that's important. And I think certainly in terms of members of Congress and others who speak out on these issues, speak with the president, they're telling him that this is critically important, really, for the United States and its friends and partners in the Indo-Pacific for the rest of this century.